to me, I just think it's crying out to be processed. It's crying out for another set of affordances to be placed onto my sounds to get me to where I want to go. Hi everyone, welcome back to Green One again. This is our final set of videos now, the third session that we decided to do some work on. And this one's a cover of a Stormzy track, Vossi Bop, which we weren't trying to recreate the sound of electronic drums or programmed drums on this occasion. On this occasion we wanted to work with an acoustic drum kit and see what we could do to get it to a point where it sounded sort of convincing to what you might do if you were to perform this track live with a live drummer. So we went with a much simplified setup actually, but this time with the most aggressive pulling in of the panel work in the studios. So all of the various large panels are brought in, and also we screened off using the smaller panels, built a kind of fort around the drum kit, which again you'll see in the video content. And of course, single hi-hat, snare, kick. So the toms left the building, all the cymbals are gone. So a mono overhead seemed to be the most appropriate way to capture this. So we went with a mono overhead, and again with this idea of sort of processing what we were looking at doing, but I still wanted to create a session whereby there were things for you to listen to and explore and see the differences. So on this occasion we've actually got multiple kick mics, but this time in slightly different positions to what we've had before. So the kick in, which is in the position we've always had it right at the very front, that's a Sennheiser 421, because again we wanted that pop, that transient. I mean, it's not the fastest, spikiest transient, as you say, get from a condenser, but we've heard in all the recordings it's very forward, aggressive, full of detail, and takes EQ incredibly well, which we'll come back to. We then had a mic in the kick port itself, right in the port, and in fact we could have a quick listen to these as we go through. So our kick in. So we hear our kick in there. In fact, I might just turn that up a little smidge. Much as we've heard so far, lots of punch and pop on that one. We then put a mic actually physically in the port, an RE20. So this one I'm expecting to be probably a bit out of control with low end movement, because the port tends to be quite turbulent, which microphones don't always enjoy. But let's see what we get. There's like a weird gobbly synth noise in that one, where we can actually hear the resonant head of the drum kit moving, which is why it's not always a great spot to go, but there is tons of sub in it, so potentially something useful in there, but on this occasion we're going to turn that one down. We've also got a kick out in the form of an M147, which is a personal favourite actually on kick out. That's got so much punch, but also there's low end power in it, but it is controlled. So I think that's potentially exciting. So we'll leave that one up for now. We've then got another kick out, which is a U87 in almost the same position, slightly higher. You'll see it in the footage, I think. Now that's picked up a lot of room tone, but I tell you what, if you gated out the snare, there is some serious low end in that. I mean, we're listening on mains in here, which move a lot of air, and trousers are flapping a little bit with it. There's some power in that low end there. So interesting what happens with these microphones. We've got snare top, which again is our traditional 57. which sounds like a 57 does. Different snare again, tighter sound, more punch, again tuned to be for this particular style that we were going for. And again, we've got the condenser version on the same snare. It's a bit hi-hat in that one, and a bit hollow sounding for me. I'm not sure it suits that snare as well as the 57, so we'll run with the 57 for now. Snare bottom we're quite used to hearing. And we've got 2 mono overheads. I think it's worth noting that is a cardioid mic placed quite closely to the drum kit, and we're still getting room influence. So you always hear a little bit of room. That's part of the recording. But amazingly tight if you consider that this is the same room that we did the John Mayer in. It's I think it's quite impressive the range of drum sounds that you can get through manipulating the space in this drum room. It's a really interesting room to work in. So again, that's the M147 that we've just heard on the Dua Lipa track. We've also got the Coles as a mono overhead. The way it's producing the kick drum is way too spacey, too much room, but the way it's producing the snare makes you want to chop the snares out and sample it. Lovely, lovely body in that Coles on that snare there. We're going to stick with the 147 for now because it's tighter. We want a tight sound. And there's a hi-hat mic, which is something I just rarely enjoy. And actually that's an SM7, which sounds great on the hi-hat, quite a lot of bleed, but still I think very usable. Then there's the usual corridor fun. Which is a world of fun, and actually suits the energy of this track. The tempo, the space, it fills the gaps really nicely. Probably going to change the track quite a bit, but interesting. So here's our sort of 4 mics that we've kind of settled upon. And so I think it's amazing how tight and punchy that sounds compared with our Mayer and our Dua Lipa that sits somewhere in between those two. So you can see how with mic technique alone, you can really make some interesting progress. We'll drop the corridor in for a bit of fun. Probably not for the track, but I love the tone of it. I'd give it a go. We'll probably reproduce things around it to try and make that work quite excitingly. But that basically is the core setup that we had for this. You'll notice there's a bunch of other things in the session here, some muted channels. We're going to come back to those in a later video, because though we've got a really great punchy drum sound off the mic, straight off the mic pre, to me, I just think it's crying out to be processed. It's crying out for another set of affordances to be placed onto my sounds to get me to where I want to go. I want to manipulate these. I want to make my performer excited. I want to be jumping around the room, enjoying the low end punch and snap of it. So we use the desk effectively to use the insert send to split the signal out into audio processing and then bring them back onto independent channels. Earlier on, we recorded with the API pre's, and actually with the API pre, we came back in again via the cleanest route possible. We didn't come in through the mic pre, we came in through a tape input, which doesn't have a padded mic pre or anything involved. This one, again, we brought them back in to the console then to record back into Pro Tools. The reason why we brought them back in with the API was to give us the ability to pull the fader down so that we could push the mic pre harder to keep our gain structure. And again here we can push the EQ and create ourselves a bit of headroom back into Pro Tools by having our send back in on a fader. By being able to pull that down, I can control the level going back, which means I can ask more of all this stuff. So we'll come back to that. But before we do that, we're going to have a little discussion video about actually the monitoring environment and how we monitored and how I monitored during this track and why I chose to work the way I chose to work on this particular track, because I think it's something that's going to be very important to you. This was actually my first time working in this room. And for some of you, it might be your first time working in this room. Some of you might have been working in the room for the last 2 years. So quite comfortable with how it sounds and have learnt the room inside out. But for me, in my first time using the space, there were certain tools I wanted to rely on in order to maximise my potential for good translation of work. So we'll get back to that in the next video.